If you're out there in the lobby, feel free to come in and take a seat. We're going to start our workshop meeting with our town clerk taking attendance and then rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. Charlie?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the town of Orangetown. This is a workshop meeting. This is Tuesday, October 17th. And on a roll call, Councilman Troy.
Present.
Councilman Divney.
Here.
Councilman Valentine.
Here.
Councilman Batari.
Here.
Supervisor Stewart.
Here.
And I'd like to stand and say, begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charlie. As Charlie mentioned, this is a workshop meeting. There are going to be, there's a public hearing, and there'll be a vote related to that. But it's a workshop meeting that our agenda items are largely in draft format for next week, and the town board treats it as a work session. We'll have invited presentations, but we won't have public comment like we do at regular town board meetings. So we look forward to that next week. For starters, we have a public hearing scheduled on the Blauvelt Fire District. This public hearing is a formal requirement of the budgeting process. We've been partnering, obviously, and budgeting for the Blauvelt Fire Protection District for many years, and the state requires a public hearing in addition to having our usual public discussion of town budgeting, and we've had presentations, and I know that the fire district, they've obviously been here before, and we've discussed their budget in depth. So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing on the one-year contract for the Blauvelt Volunteer Fire Department. Do I have a second? Over here from Tom Divney. All in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Since we've discussed this before, I'll cut straight to the chase. We had a sign-in sheet. Nobody signed into it to discuss or comment on the proposed budget for the Blauvelt Fire Department. I see Mike Conklin in the back there. You've spoken to the town board before, so unless you really feel the need to make a presentation, you're all set? Okay. By the raise of hands, is anybody here to speak at this public hearing who didn't actually sign in? All right, I don't see any signs up. We have a motion to close the public portion from Councilman Divney, a second over here from Dennis Troy. All in favor say aye. Aye. There's a series of resolutions related to the fire contract. I don't know that we need to do these tonight or that we want to. John, does it make any difference whether we do all of these related to the fire contract or just take them next week? Are we? All right, may as well get it done then. Oh, we have a deadline to pass the contract. Okay. So we closed the public hearing. The next couple of items, thank you, Vicki, for that. You can fill it in as town attorney. Appreciate that. With these kinds of contracts, we have to do a secret declaration, which is environmental. So item number 3 is the town declaring itself as lead agency under the State Environmental Quality Review Act and considering all of the potential environmental impacts from a contract with the Blauvelt Fire Department, which in my mind, all of which are positive. In other words, they're good for the environment. Making a declaration of negative as to any negative environmental consequences. So therefore, be it resolved, we've declared ourselves lead agency, that the action we're considering is unlisted under SECRA, that we determine that a one-year contract with the fire company will not have adverse impact on the environment, so we're doing a non-significance or negative declaration, and that's the first matter for a vote. I'll make a motion for this. Do you hear a second from Jerry Batari? All in favor say aye. Aye. Thanks for Jerry, and pardon for rushing things along. Item number 4 is actually adopting the one-year contract. So this simply states the total sum of $636,500, including workers' comp insurance, and that's the total for the contract for the year. And I will, once again, as we've done before, thank the members of the fire district for your service to the town. and for your oversight of that area and all your equipment and firehouse and everything else, which I know is a source of great pride for you. So please convey our appreciation to the rest of the team. I'll have a motion for approval of the contract from over here, from Paul Valentine. Second over here from Jerry Bertaro. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. All right, so that takes care of the Blauvelt Fire Department. Our next public hearing is on the library districts, and some people may be scratching their heads, but we have really good town attorneys, and they determined that whereas in past years the town had its public discussion of the library budgets the way we usually do through the budget process, that actually a close reading of state law indicates that a public hearing separate from all the other public meetings that we have about the budget is required for library districts as well. So there's a series of resolutions here: opening a public hearing, closing it, declaring lead agency, and that's it. The actual adoption of the contracts for the libraries would be taken as a part of our final budget adoption on November 14th, I think. So these two resolutions simply apply to the public hearing. And so I'll make a motion to open the public hearing on the Orangetown Library District contracts. That's plural. Do I have a second over here from Dennis? All in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. So the public hearing is open. And for this one, we actually have people who signed in to address the board on the topic of the library budgets. And I'll remind you that there are 4 under consideration. Each one has its own contract with the town: Blauvelt, Palisades, Tappan, and Orangeburg. So Mrs. Beverly Warwick from Palisades.
Good evening and thank you.
Welcome.
I'm going to briefly share what we shared last month. I'm here representing the Palisades Library. It is written regarding to the 2018 budget request from the town of Orangetown. We're asking for a 0% increase, which is $381,768. The budgeted expenses for 2018 are 3% above 2017. We plan to pay for this increase with the additional $23,000 from the school district and $25,000 from the fund balance. The unrestricted fund balance is approximately $147,000. The 2018 proposed budget, most lines in the budget are flat or have a modest increase. Areas that have more than a modest increase are the increase in the hours of the part-time children's librarian from 16 to 20 hours per week. We're going to replace staff and public computers. The amount there is $3,700. Increase the ebook purchases by $1,000. Increase program supplies for staff led programs at $2,800. Increase printing and mailing for a newsletter 5 times a year between the 10964. The newsletters would total $2,065. There are a few long-term maintenance issues. The building itself is in good shape. We've renovated the interior in 2013 and replaced the roof in 2014. Areas that will need to be addressed in the next 2 to 5 years: the air conditioning system is old, over 20 years old. The elevator shaft continues to have some water issues, and the equipment itself is over 20 years old. And finally, natural gas power generator. And that's all I have for tonight. If there are any questions?
I feel like we've had pretty extensive discussion of the library budgets before, so is there any questions or comments? Or okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming out tonight.
Great, thank you.
We do have someone else signed in as well, Rodney Pico. Welcome.
My name is Rodney Pike, and I live in Sparkhill, New York, and I'm also a trustee on the Orangetown Library Board. And I am confident that you had a discussion. There was some discussion last month with Sister Virginia about our budget crisis, and I do understand there has to be a shared sacrifice, but we're absolutely running out of money. The library's budget was not increased in 2010, 11, or 12, and then in 2013 and 14, we took a 10% cut in our appropriations. I'm reading from a prepared statement, so forgive me. A restoration of funding for the coming year is absolutely essential if our library is to have any hope of retaining our hours and providing the services which are relied upon by your community. As our capital reserve fund is now depleted, even major cuts to library materials, hours, and services are unlikely to be enough to preserve the library. The restoration to the 2010 levels represents the minimum amount necessary for continued library operations. We are currently operating with the funding levels we had in 2006, and costs, especially that of health care and salaries and pension, have skyrocketed since then. We've made cuts to materials, hours, and service budgets over the past year, and the Board of Trustees has tabled a decision to further reducing hours and cutting other budget lines pending the final decision of the town board. But we have been informed by our auditors that even cutting hours down to 35 per week may not be enough to keep the library open now that we have no reserve fund to fall back on. We've basically depleted our capital reserve fund. 35 hours is the minimum required by the state minimum standards in order for the library to retain its charter. Orangeburg Library is still a vibrant cultural center and information resource. We have 2,467 card holders, and that number doesn't include any of the other Orangetown residents with cards from other libraries that use our resources. Our outreach and delivery services to communities who may not make it to the library easily, such as the convent and assisted living communities, are some of our most vital and endangered services. Likewise, our services to children are highly utilized and should not be cut. This summer, we had 40% more children registered for the summer reading program than last year, and 57% more teens took part, reading for 91% more minutes than last year. As of yet, these programs have been unaffected by cuts to the library hours, but any additional cuts will have a negative impact on our local families. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer them. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pico. Jerry? I saw you raising your glasses. I thought maybe you were going to. Our next person signed in on the library's public hearing is Jane Fuller.
Hi, good evening. I am not a librarian, but I am a proud library card owner, and I live in Blauvelt, and I use most of the libraries. I use Orangeburg and Blauvelt and Nyack primarily. Now, I feel the real town hall is the library, because from what I observe, and I live in New York, I work in New York City, but I live out here, I use the library at least once to twice a week. This is what I observe. I observe people doing ESL there, English as a second language. They're doing it on the weekends after jobs. This is really important because certain people, certain groups live in our county, and we need our libraries. We need the computers. Guess what? Today, FiOS in my house is not working. I can't use my computer, but I can walk to Blauvelt Library and I can use the computer. Guess what? I need a notary on a Sunday. I can go to Blauvelt. I can go to another library. These are really important things that we have here. It's intergenerational. It's for old and young. I just think it's really important. I know this is about the budget. Maybe this isn't the right time for me to speak.
No, that's why we're having a hearing.
Okay. So I just really want to put it out there. I know other people, and I go to the library. I use the books. I use the films. When I'm there and I'm not at home, if I need to look up something, I'm on the computer. It's crazy if Rockland County starts cutting libraries to this effect. Westchester is not doing this. New York City is not doing this. They know it's important. We're part of the metro area. We have to be as educated and savvy, and that's what our libraries give to us. So I thank you for your time, and I hope you keep our libraries going and don't cut them to shreds. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, that exhausts our list of people who signed in. By raise of hands, is anybody else here to speak to the question of the library budgets? All right, I'm not seeing a hand go up, so I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on the library district budgets. Do I have a second over here from Jerry? All in favor, say aye. Sorry, Paul, neglected you on that one. This is our next, so that closes that. And we also have the secret declaration, and I mentioned earlier that we would hold off, and we will have another public hearing for the budget, in which case people could come and speak more to any question related to the budget, including the libraries. But the next item would be the secret declaration, whereby the town declares itself as lead agency, issues a negative declaration as far as any significant environmental impacts, and it describes the fact that it's a one-year contract, and it lists the libraries, and it's more or less a formality. I'll make a motion for this resolution. Do I have a second over here from Paul? All right, we got a second from Paul Valentine. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thanks. You know, while we're at it, well, actually, no, we were going to cut over to Larry Lane and Mutual Architects, I think. I just wanted to mention before we do that, I think tonight, right, we have to actually vote on the preliminary budget, which is the second of 3 drafts of our town budget, the last one being the adoption of a final budget. And so after our presentations, we'll switch back over to that, and you can expect either just a pass-through of the supervisor's budget or some small adjustments, looking towards November 14th for the consideration and approval of final budget. So we will be taking a vote on that. But let's first turn our attention to the presentation by the Mutual Group. And I see folks right here, Larry and Noel. Thank you for coming in. Just as a little background for folks who may not be aware, that you came on a good night because the town board had issued a request for proposals from architectural firms to get information relevant to our decision about what to do about the kind of aging and obsolescence of this building, with the idea being that maybe we could consolidate with a new facility, bring the building department in, and in one way or another address the eventual demise of this building. And we hired Mutual Architects to advise us in that, not to provide a design for a new building, but to provide more of a feasibility options for how to use this site, whether we should consider alternative sites, and what the relative costs are, and some concepts for either reuse or replacement of this building. And so we're kind of driving towards a final analysis related to that, so the town board's in a position to think about, you know, timelines and for other decisions related to possibly having a design done or considering how to finance matters. And that's what we're here tonight to talk about. And so we have in our possession a document regarding the estimated cost of reusing the old town hall building, which we're calling Building A. And that is in comparison to not reusing, but essentially demolishing and rebuilding on this site. And I think Councilman Divany particularly wanted to make sure that we have a sense of what our options are, if there is a reuse value, if it makes sense to pursue that. So please fire away, guys. Thank you for coming in tonight. And this actually came very recently. I'm not sure if it was, I think it was sometime around midday today. So I haven't had a chance to read this yet. So appreciate an introduction to this, and then the town board will obviously need to study the document further. So go ahead.
I'm sure you'll have to get into it, Mr. Supervisor, but thank you again for the opportunity to be here, Mr. Supervisor, board members. I'll let Larry get into the nitty-gritty of the report, but it basically is an analysis of what it will take to bring this particular building up to present-day standards so you could still use it as your municipal building. Different from the other schemes that we had provided you, where we incorporated all the municipal functions into the building. This still leaves the building department and the fire over at the other location.
And does not include costs for renovations down there.
No, it does
If
not.
One might argue that they need it more than this building does, so.
Right, exactly. So, Mr. Supervisor, with that, I'll turn it over to Larry to give you a brief.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Mule. This is the first presentation that we presented to the board, you may recall, and in there it had several schemes, and as Mr. Mule had mentioned, we have now come to with this report that I think you have in your hand. And in this report, we're looking at what the estimated cost would be to reuse this building that we're in, the old town hall, Building A. And from our original report, we actually mentioned that this building has structural damage. It has, is not current with the handicap requirements that it needs to have. To bring it up to code with the handicap requirements is going to require more area just to make it handicapped. For example, hallways and door widths and some of the stairs perhaps, the ramps and restrooms. And those will affect how much space will be remaining to be used for workspaces in here and for meeting areas. The mechanical system here needs to be upgraded. The next page that is, well, the second page of the report is quite extensive at talking about some of the findings of the existing mechanical system and how it is obsolete and how it does need to be replaced and some of the recovery of the cost that could be expected in the expense of upgrading the mechanical system here. We also talked in our previous report that this building has hazardous materials such as asbestos that we know about. And so there would be some effort that would be needed to remove, to abate the asbestos. So moving on to past the mechanical, I'll go over the report real quick. We do have a breakdown of some costs that would be involved with renovating this building, and they would include approximately $5,250,000 to do the renovation for this building. And that number would include all new windows. All the windows need to be insulated with insulated glass, new insulation along the exterior walls. It's lacking right now. Right now it's not energy efficient at all. New insulation below the roof, reduction of usable office spaces in order to provide the handicap access, and I just mentioned that. And the replacement of the energy efficient lighting with LED lights, having all mechanical, plumbing, electrical and sprinkler systems, all new doors, all new insulated exterior doors. We would want to repaint and put new floor and ceiling finishes. There would also be a need to refinish the exterior spandrels outside where the mosaic tile is missing in many places. And speaking of missing in many places, the columns that are along the outside are spalling. And many of those, you can see the rusted steel concrete that it was once encased with its concrete enclosure that's now broken away or spalled. There's also a known beam below us that is shored up that will need to be replaced. And there may be others. We haven't been able to see everything, obviously, but this is our best guess right now, that it would be around $300,000 to repair or replace the damaged steel beams and columns. There would be a cost with all the IT department here, and I realize there are also IT closets elsewhere than in this building, but it's connected somewhat here as well, that there would be a bridging of that system to another place, and there would be a cost involved with that. We put in $100,000 for that, maybe conservative. And then there would be needs for new exterior ramps, stairs, handrails, guardrails to meet the current building codes, another $150,000. Again, I'd mentioned that you need to have abatement of hazardous materials such as asbestos tiles, possibly lead paint. We put a number for $250,000 for that. Then there would also be moving cost to relocate employees out from this building to a temporary location. And you're going to find, and I'll go through it with you on the following pages, some various scenarios about where those employees can go temporarily. Down below, we're mentioning that the cost can vary, depending on the season that you decide to act on this. And there's also additional variable costs. The temporary workspace we mentioned, and there's various types such as a pre-engineered building, or maybe moving them into a shopping center that's empty, or an empty office building that's nearby. That might not be too far for the commuters and also the employees to still work in this building when they need to, such as the attorneys who need to go to the courtroom, or even the judges who are now in this building that would also need to work in the courtroom of the building B. So we also included a shuttle service cost that you may need to consider in order to allow the employees to still work on this property while officing in a different location, different site. So then there will also be some soft costs. In the next page, the last page here of this report, before the addendum, it talks about the engineering fees and architectural fees, surveys, different engineers, environmental engineers, and different testing, permits, and bonding costs. That could be as much as $1,443,000. There is an addendum to this report, and in the addendum, you're going to see a chart. It begins with a chart. And this chart is color-coded, and it's borrowed from this previous report that we talked about in mid-June. And it's added, we added 3 columns to the right of that to extract departments and square footages of departments that are in this building, not all the square footage, but what would be needed for temporary basis elsewhere while the employees are working in a different location than this building when this is being renovated. And it's all broken down, and we came up with about 10,465.1. So let's say it's 10,500 square feet. And then there's also a need of temporary storage. There's quite a bit of storage downstairs with some long-term storage that's being used from various departments, and those need to go somewhere also while this building is being vacated. There's also a need, and the biggest complaint that we had that needed to be solved, besides the building department and the fire protection to move to the same site, that was solved by this original proposal. But aside from that, the building department was just running out of space. You may remember me discussing that as well, about how inefficient spatially, area-wise, they are in right now. So most of that is due to the papers that they must store. And unfortunately, if they were to stay in that building and not build another building on top of that, then we're looking at maybe some permanent storage still as they have now, which are 8-foot by 20-foot containers. And we found that they would need about a little over almost 1,100 square feet of that. But let's go back to the next page, which is the site. And it's titled Location of Temporary Office Trailers and Storage Containers at the Town Hall Site. And you can see how there's 14 temporary office units, and they're placed in the parking lot on the pavement so that we're not disturbing trees. And there are 14 temporary storage containers as well. Those are 8 by 20, just like they use now at the building department. To do that, we would lose about 79 parking spaces, and so the total parking spaces of 170 would be reduced down to about 91. The cost of doing this is on the next page. So we're looking at, in this example, double-wide trailer type of office, temporary office buildings, or trailers. And they are 64 feet by 12 feet. The actual usable space is gross about 60 feet by 12 feet. And there's an example, you can page through, there's an example of a floor plan of one of those units. But as we're showing it, we're doing it back to back and tangential. So they're bunched up together and they can all share a space and share stairs and doors going into it in various pods. But this, for cost comparisons or analysis, we found that we needed 14 units by this square footage calculation. And it breaks down what it would cost per unit, of those units, and that would be about $1,900 per unit. And then there's also the delivery cost and the number of months it's being used. Then it comes out to about $784,000 to rent the temporary office trailers and to put them in the parking area. They would have their own restrooms. They would have potable water brought to them by the utilities, and then also electric. And then there's also storage. The storage, we need about 14 of those 8 by 20 units, and that comes out to about almost $33,000, totaling about $816,000 for both the temporary offices and temporary storage areas. And if we are not going, like I said, move the building department here and solve their spatial issues, then we need about 7 additional containers, as you'll see on the next page, showing the locations of those. And the next page will tell how much those would cost. And this is more of a purchase basis, to purchase these and also to have an asphalt pad on the grass, not to take up any more parking for these units. It would cost almost $39,000. Then the next page, we're talking about the RPC. This is an option. Instead of putting the trailers on this property, there was talk earlier on to actually build a pre-engineered metal building and use that as a temporary office space. To do that, it shows on the site how much space that would take to have a 100-foot by 200-foot pre-engineered metal building placed somewhere on the RPC site. And the total of that would be about $3,528,806. And that would include not only the building, but it would also include the utilities, the pavement, the sidewalks, the site lighting, things of that sort. So they can actually move in, but consider also that there would be that cost of shuttling the employees from this site to Building B, particularly the attorneys and the judicial branch to use the courtrooms. The next page will give you a quick idea of what these temporary units look like for offices. They are, like I said, 64 by 12, but the usable area is about 60 by 11 foot 8. Each one of those are priced to have a restroom in it. They don't all have to have them. There may be a little bit of savings if we didn't have them in every one of those units of each pod, but there will be a need for some of that. And then this next page will give you a quick glimpse of what it looks like in one of their model office areas, and I think the next few pages will show you some sketches of how it lays out as office spaces to kind of give you a visual of what you might expect in an office space. And we already know from the building department what those storage containers are, but there's a quick cut sheet of that. And then for the pre-engineered building, it would look very much like the last page, which is like this. And those, you can see on this page, there are columns along the center of that, and the building that you choose to have may not have columns. And if you may want to use it for an athletic, or like maybe put 2 or 3 tennis courts in there, or I don't know, and eventually after the employees move out. So I'm going to give the floor back up to the supervisor, and if you have any questions, please ask.
One of the questions, you know, that I would have, and I'm trying to do math in my head, but if you take the costs that you've outlined, and then, you know, if we go on the assumption that you know, the building department building is in just as much need of renovation as this one is, so you add in that project, plus the cost of relocating them somewhere and then bringing them back, and all of the sort of headaches that go with coming and going and the lost public service benefits and everything else. I think the number you get to is a lot bigger than the sort of $7.3 million that you would get if you're just looking at your estimated cost of renovating Town Hall of 6.1 plus another 1.2 for solutions related to living elsewhere for 2 years. I think you'd end up at a much higher number, which you obviously didn't provide here, if you included the same treatment for the building department, which arguably is just as much on its last legs. And so I know I can't ask you for that number, but I think that the 6.1 plus 1.2 is probably low.
With those considerations, it certainly is. And I think you touched on some of the functional issues as well that are, I think, very important. And that one of the reasons we were asked to do the initial study is to show, and this is one of the main things, is to show how all departments can be brought to one site. And there must be a functional reason for that.
Right. No, I think we started off on this conversation because we all kind of intuitively believe that it was worth considering the benefits to the public and the town of consolidating facilities. If you're going to build a new town hall, bring the building department in, make it all work efficiently, and that was the concept. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to make darn sure that, you know, we're comparing that vision to kind of a bare bones alternative, because in Orangetown, you know, we always watch our pennies, and we don't like to just go out and you know, we want to make sure what our alternatives are.
Right.
And so that's why we're doing this. And I would just, you know, so I appreciate you coming with this information, and it provides a lot of detail as to what the renovation process would look like and how much it would cost. And I would just want, you know, town board members have questions or concerns related to this information, fire away. I think that, you know, I think in some ways, personally, I think it would be preposterous to pursue an option.
Yeah,
It
I
leaves so
think
many things undone and still spends a lot of money.
you missed one part there, Andy. There's a soft cost of 1.4 million plus the 6.1 million.
Yeah, I meant,
Plus
right.
the renovation of the other building, so you're at almost $8.5 million before you consider the town, the building department. So just to renovate this building, you're at $8.5 million. It really sort of leads us to the right. If you're doing it, you gotta do it.
But, you know, you gotta put that in perspective of what it's gonna cost
To build a new one.
to do the new one. You're talking $18-19 million there.
I'm talking double.
You're talking double, and you know what? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, so I don't think, Andy, I would say it's preposterous. You're talking adding like $9 million onto the cost that we're suggesting to do, and how you could say that's preposterous.
No, I
to be
didn't.
honest.
Actually, I thought that the total on the new town hall was less than that. But
I think it was in that ballpark.
do you remember what the number was? like 14
It was
or
12
something?
million for the scheme 4 that we,
So
But
this
what
is
about the
where-
soft costs?
Soft costs were another $1.5 million, something like that.
So it's probably,
Say 2 million.
probably,
So you're up to
15
14.
million, so you're talking
Yeah.
15,
yeah, I
16.
think that was the
It's-
top number,
it's-
14,
That's
15,
still
yeah.
6 million, $7
You
million.
know, that's why we
higher.
want to look at these things. I agree with that.
But one of the things,
I thought their numbers were closer.
It puts everything in one spot and gives the additional space required for growing a town hall. So, yeah, it is a lot more money, but if we're selling some of the property at RPC, it's something that should be considered. This building's falling apart.
I think
Not
one of the things
disagreeing,
that we,
just disagreeing on whether we should spend 15, 16 million dollars on a,
Or 8 million. It's not that you can't spend nothing.
didn't say you couldn't.
You know, one of the items that came up was we talked with Larry about renovating this building. It would have to be ADA compliant, which currently it is not. And so one of the wild cards, I don't know if it's listed here or not, but is that the passageways between desks and doorways and so on would expand to what they have to be by ADA compliance, and that would cut in. So we would actually, if we just started from this footprint, we'd have to actually move some workspace somewhere else in order to accommodate more space dedicated. You know, there's some wild cards in here, which I find a little discouraging on the renovation vision, just because you end up investing so much. And I think that's what we're all sort of facing as a dilemma. You know.
I think one of the things that we really need to give you is a synopsis of the various schemes with the cost, so you can see everything on a spreadsheet, and then give the pros and cons of each in a little bit more detail. As you said, for this building, your usable square footage is X, but when you consider all the ADA requirements that are coming into that, it's now going to be X minus
Something,
know,
which has
something.
got to go somewhere,
Right.
which is going to cost money.
Right.
Any other questions about this presentation? Dennis, do you want to fire away?
No, I'm glad you did this study on the reuse of the town hall. One of the things I guess we had talked about was whether you could even put a second floor in here, and I don't think you could because of the structure of the building. To me, personally, I believe this building has far outlived its use, and I would rather see everything located together. I would.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I'd like to see that spreadsheet and see where we are and see what the actual hard numbers are, but it's never easy to spend that much money, that's for sure. But, you know, if it's worth it in the long run, then we'd have to take a hard look at it and we'll see where it goes from there.
I think this is how the sewer project started.
The sewer project's legendary for being
It
over
started
budget.
at 15 and ended at 50, so I don't know.
And there are
Call
those
me-
out there who
call
say
me
that the
skeptical.
town could easily spend $100 million on its sewer system
Yeah.
and still not be finished.
Exactly.
So
That,
I think we need another draft,
that's the concern with.
which puts it all
redoing the
together
building.
and includes some kind of estimate on the renovation of the building
A
department
new building
and the
doesn't
off-site
handle all the costs, though.
quarters, because otherwise, we're really not looking at the full cost of renovation.
Yeah, me too.
And would that be satisfactory to the town board if we had those columns set up?
Yeah, I think
You know,
that'd
full
be
cost
very
renovation, just bring it all down to the bottom line, understanding that some of these things are gonna be guesses, but still. And then full cost of a scenario or two that you'd already laid out, where we could build a new building here and move everybody into it, and then demo this side and
Right.
do some other alterations and be done.
Okay, we'll certainly do that. Thank you very much.
I hope that was instructive for our taxpayers out there. The quandary the town faces with regard to these major capital projects. We're compelled to face these things because our heating and air conditioning system and the facade of the building and other things might need emergency repairs that would be pretty darn expensive in themselves. we're frequently reminded by our highway superintendent, actually, that if you don't maintain your roads and seal the cracks, you pay a much bigger bill later on. So where does that leave us? I wanted to mention there's a bunch of artwork on the wall here. Next week, we'll have the teacher and students represented. So just take a look at this, and there's some text on the wall there. This is a local elementary school project which has gotten a lot of attention, and the exhibit is only here for a short period, so we want people to take a look. We'll talk more about that next week. So let's get back to where we left off. I think let's see. Okay, so I think we're at item number 8. Item number 8 requires a little bit of explanation, although I think we all are familiar with the context. The town board and our various departments, attorneys, building, engineering, have been focused on improving the way the town handles issues of pollution. And we recently passed some increases in penalties related to that, and there's an ongoing project which we're doing in-house with the help of Sandra Bonville, who's an environmental chemist. The town board supported hiring in order to provide some expertise. But we're working, Alan Riff, myself, Vicky Caramonte, Dennis Michaels, town attorney's office, Sander, and Tom and other members of the town board, all feeding into this process of saying, okay, let's take the pieces of the town code that need to be updated or improved and kind of work our way through them. So number 8 pertains to setting a public hearing for the consideration of amendments to the town code related to 3 areas of concern. And since that public hearing is out to December 5th, I hope you'll beg the pardon, where our group is refining those proposals and wants to get some more feedback from our town attorney's office and other places. Essentially, the decision by the town board I'm asking for is simply to set a public hearing, but I'll just describe the areas that seem to me to be low-hanging fruit for these environmental performance standards revisions. We're really starting with how do we measure the various impacts, whether it's particulate matter, which is grit coming out in smoke, or smoke itself, or noise, or odor, which has been such a concern with the Aloof outfit, and the kind of updating of the metrics and methods. And the proposals involve just that work. There's areas which will be, we'll need to keep working on. For example, Dennis Michaels is busy looking at the way performance standards procedures work. It can be cumbersome between the ZBA and the building department and the applicants. Also looking at the way ongoing or continuing enforcement works. So there's a lot more to do.
What about the actual performance standards?
The standards, the metrics that we want to use to measure odor, to measure noise, to measure particulate matter, to measure vibration and other emissions are the subject of this set.
All right.
It's not all of them, though.
It's-
For
no,
example,
but
I don't have
it's-
noise in there right now.
Well, noise is probably the hardest one.
It's a difficult one. And so, so moving towards a quantitative standard that's practical. There are quantitative standards which require a lot of science and technology, and we can have applicants hire third parties to do that. But there's some things that the town itself can do. Just for example, a while back when we were talking about odor, actually some of the members of our community came in and said there's this thing called olfactometer, which is essentially an instrument that can be used to measure odor using the human nose, but a method of dilution of air so that you figure out exactly the concentration which can be perceived, and then you work from there as far as compliance goes. So Jane Slavin, of course, has been very helpful in this, and I want to thank you, Jane. You've taken the bull by the horns. It's great to have you on board, and these matters will be refined a little bit more and circulated to the town board in preparation, and comments collected in preparation for a hearing on December 5th.
So they're gonna have to go out by November 5th.
Right.
All right.
They'll be circulated. So, but let's share them about a little bit over the next week or so. We
And the
really-
reason that is because they needed 30-day response from certain agencies.
That's why we set the hearing out as far as we did. So it's actually pretty exciting work, and hopefully we're picking out the parts which we could fix with the level of time and effort that we're putting in, and be setting up for the next steps that I outlined before. So that's that one. Vicki, were we going to actually set that public hearing tonight? Oh, next week we can do it on the usual agenda. Okay. Item number 9, we have to be voted on tonight is the tentative budget being passed through as a preliminary budget unless there are changes to it that folks, I haven't been informed. I don't know if Jeff, you've been informed of any changes, and members of the town council. Okay, so we're going to take our supervisor's budget, which is the first draft, and call it the preliminary budget. And that will be the budget that would be subject to a public hearing on November 14th at 8:05. It becomes the budget. We'll have the public hearing on, and we can make adjustments to it before we approve a final budget. So I'll make a motion for number 9 on the budget becoming preliminary. Do I have a second on that from over here? Dennis, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, so number 10 is surplusing equipment, and there's a list of phone stuff from our IT department. Number 11 also is from Automated Services. This has to do with upgrading the phone system. Let's see, I don't see, there is Anthony. Does anybody have any questions for Anthony about this? No, okay. Anthony and the finance department they've been saving us a lot of money over the last few years by upgrading phone systems, and that's much appreciated. And one of the things they do, they don't just do hardware and software, but they look for good contracts for the town and ones that save us money. Number 12 is a settlement related to a sewer backup of $6,000. Number 13 is a settlement related to a traffic accident for $15,000. Number 14 is a road widening, acceptance of a deed for road widening on Erie Street, and a stormwater maintenance agreement. And it describes that this is the area where the Subaru company is investing in a property for vehicle repair there for the new cars to, I guess, outfit them. Number 15 is, this is a situation where we have some cars which are inoperable or will soon cost so much money to fix that it doesn't make sense to fix them. And so this item is to authorize the repair at a substantial cost and the purchase. And it provides a little bit of information as to the rationale, because I know I like to hear from the mechanics when a car needs to be replaced. And so it has the information from Frank Panino there, and it's got the vehicle numbers, how many miles they have on them, and what the major repairs required are. And essentially, I just want to draw your attention to the last paragraph in the resolution, because it approves certain repairs, but also the purchase of a new vehicle to replace vehicle 403, which comes at a certain cost. Number 16 is the bike, I guess it's a bike race. It's a super fast race, or kind of a fun roll through town. But in any case, the highway department and the police department are coordinating on that. Number 17 is Share Christmas with the Rotary Club of Pearl River for event support. Number 18 is declaration of surplus equipment from the highway department for a John Deere piece of equipment. Number 19 is, this is our employee assistance program, which is an annual contract with Nyack Hospital that employees can use or be referred to in times of need for mental health purposes. Number 20 is the use of the showmobile for the Halloween parade, which is coming up in Nyack soon. Number 21, showmobile for Share Christmas on December 8th. Number 22, showmobile for the Orangeburg Fire Department's holiday parade. 23 is a 5K run on in Nyack. Number 24 is the fence. This is an item which has been subject to a good deal of discussion and neighbor kind of concern. Bottom line is that Orange and Rockland has a rather draconian policy where they remove any and all vegetation that might someday get close to the power lines. Vegetation that in many cases could be trimmed and is slow growing, which presents the town with a problem of maintaining the quality of the screening or buffering in the park along the rail trail. And so this fence is the preferred solution to it. And it's going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000. And it seemed to be the thing that was the best alternative in a bad situation. The town did negotiate with O&R for the better part of that to be reimbursed, but it's still some out-of-pocket money. And I know that the community, a number of folks have asked for little gates to get through that fence at an extra cost of, I think, $800 a gate or something like that. And the town board members may have gotten phone calls about that or appreciate the need for that from the neighbors.
You know what? I mean, we discussed it today. I think just give them the gates, you know, getting most of it reimbursed by O&R.
Does anybody have a strong opinion or want to hear from Eric Gorton about the fences? Because
I mean,
you know, the overall cost of the fence is substantial. Adding the gates is incremental on that. And
incremental and allows them, affords them the opportunity to have access to the rail trail.
one of the things that I think is kind of neat about rail trails is that sometimes people are opposed to them, but once they're in there, everybody wants to get on them right out of their backyard, which is understandable. And so
I think it's.
I'm definitely sympathetic to having gates for
Yeah,
people to
I
get through.
agree with you, Andy, on that one.
I'm fine with the gates.
All right, so we'll do the gates. We got 3 votes. You guys are for the gates, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Railroad gates. It's about actually $8,000. There was a bid already in, I believe, right, in Yabu. This is the awarding of the bid to Yabu Fence. Within the numbers, actually in the neighborhood of $85,000, $95,000, right? Right. With a little over half of that paid by O&R.
Who maintains this fence?
It would be town-owned.
The gate goes in every backyard?
There are roughly 10 houses that would need gates. Is that right, Eric?
Yes.
There are 10 houses on the largest. Not all of those folks have committed to wanting a gate. That's something we're gonna have to work out.
Some do, some don't.
So those that have fences now have gates. But they have fences that aren't necessarily gonna serve as a barrier between them and the trail. They're chain link or stockade, decorative in a couple cases. They don't really create a barrier, so. That's where we're at.
We're making the best of a situation which is really very unfortunate. The green buffer was a nice thing to have. We were able to get by just trimming them. The O&R was, and then eventually they basically dropped the hammer and said, we're going to rip everything out, which is.
Should we award the bid to the lowest responsible bidder?
That's fine. They were the low bid, for sure, yes.
Okay, number 25 is the donation of a memorial bench. And this is in memory of Richard Ingersoll Sr., to be located along the J.B. Clark Rail Trail. And we thank them for that. Number 26 is a grant application which the Justice Court is making for security and office equipment. I'm informed that it's entirely grant. In other words, there's no town match associated with that. It's for about $10,000. And we thank them for pursuing that. And that's it for items that are on the workshop agenda. Are there any other items that we need to have on the agenda for next week that anybody can think of?
I just want to add an adjournment for next week.
Okay.
Charles Vilbig of Bloville.
Can you just spell that last name?
I think it's Vilbig.
That's what I was gonna go with. Okay.
He was a Marine, a local family, lived in Bloville on the corner of Swanican and Cobble. Just a good guy, good community man.
All right. I don't think there's anything else. It looks like, knock on wood, we may actually close on the JP Morgan land sale tomorrow. And people will note that a temporary construction fence is going to be installed around the site. So if people call and say, hey, what's going on over there? They're getting their fence up so they can do their abatement of the buildings of asbestos and lead. The golf program is already rerouting traffic around 3rd, anticipation of the closure of First Ave. The Highway Department engineering did a great job building that little road down through the woods. And so I think we're good to go. Anything else? All right, I'll make a motion for adjournment. Do I have a second on that?
We're keeping these here, right? The binders?
You can pay them if you want, or we
Put them in there.
Yeah. We like to keep them here unless you really need them because Kim's always adding a new thing.
I would rather have them here.
Okay. All right, I didn't get a second on adjournment. From David, all in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it.